Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi. I recently completed my 2-month transformational leadership program, and the results were powerful. If you want to live an exciting life and fulfill your highest potential in 2023 and beyond, I have an incredible opportunity for only a few more individuals to join the next cohort. I will personally be coaching a small group on how to discover and clear your limiting beliefs, how to manage your energy instead of your time, how to tap into the power of your intuition, and how to use discernment so that you can start living a life full of ease, abundance, and flow. As someone who has helped countless entrepreneurs and CEOs open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I can tell you that this strategy will completely transform your life. Best part, you'll 10x your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly to overcome your limiting beliefs and transform that into a new self concept. I'll teach you how to create clarity, systems, and processes, and I'll also help you develop your intuition. You'll get access to some of the best material that will also help you manage your energy, and you'll get access to guided meditations that are not available anywhere else. This method is so effective. If you'd like to join the waitlist, you can find the link in the show notes or navigate to www.yasminterehi.com/gateways-to-awakening/. Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Biet, who is the world-renowned meditation leader dubbed as the David Bowie of Meditation. As a musician, Biet weaves the world of pop culture and spirituality, teaching practical applications of ancient spiritual wisdom. And her teachings are also featured in her best-selling book, Don't Just Sit There, published by Simon Schuster. She was also raised by a shaman in New York City and signed to Sony Records at the age of 19 as a singer and songwriter. And she has so many cool programs and workshops. She actually turned her lifetime study of meditation into the Guided By Biet event series. You could check that out. She's been featured in Vogue, Forbes, Elle, and Time magazine as the resident meditation guru at the Sundance Film Festival, One Hotel's MoMA, and SoulCycle. I could go on and on. And I met her at a conference recently and heard her speak, and I just immediately knew I had to have her on the show. So welcome to the show, Biet.
Thanks, Yasmin.
So to kick it off, Biet, what does the word spirituality mean to you?
I feel like this world is a mixed bag of experiences, and it's not all monotone. It really is very colorful here on planet Earth, and filled with a lot of contrast, some of which is quite painful. And to me, the art of spirituality is learning to alchemize reality. Is both being with equanimity in both the states of ecstasy and agony, and also learning to reinterpret what those things even mean, and getting to such a point of proficiency with that you are, you know, actually living a life where you're the creator of your reality and you're fully responsible in that role.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Biet. And I love that piece about really having that agency and being the creator of your space and reality. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. But I first want to talk about how your childhood shaped the way that you saw the world. You were raised by a shaman in New York. And I'm really, really interested in also speaking about your relationship with your father, who was very influential on your path.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I was gifted with the birthright of coming to this planet with the kind of father who saw the world in a completely different way. And while I have my own view of the world, which is in many ways different from his, and in many ways similar to his, um, what he taught me was that it was my responsibility to create my own mythology. And he was so, to say positive would be, I guess, I just think detracting from how amazing he was, because he wasn't just positive, he was real, he was authentic, he was raw. And I guess he had to be too, because our life was just tremendously tragic. We came to this country as Russian Jewish immigrants in 1979. As a family, I was born a month later to be the first American born citizen in my family. But, very Russian, like speaking Russian, summering in a Russian bungalow colony upstate. And my mom, like soon after, my mom died of very suddenly from pancreatic cancer. And then all my grandparents died subsequently right after that, one by one, in very like untimely and tragic ways. um, and the massive tragedy of that, paired with being an immigrant in a new country and the poverty that that comes with for anyone who's ever immigrated to a new country, or from a communist country where you have no belongings or a state. So like we just had no money, and we had death, 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 and depression. But what we did have was like a grand piano, a a complete library with every book on the esoteric arts or on philosophy or psychology that you could ever want to read. From Carl Gustav Jung to Nietzsche to Hess, we were reading, and I was reading that stuff from the time that I was around 9 years old, and playing piano and singing and meditating and doing breath work and doing transcendental meditation and yoga and love. We had love. So it was that amazing contrast of having both of those things, and it taught me the value of not just talent, but of again this alchemizing of reality, and how much it meant to, like, you're given this opportunity to be on earth. What are you going to do with it? And are you going to let these tragedies define you? And yeah, so that was the beginning.
Wow. So I want to double click on a couple of these things, specifically, coming back from difficult moments. How did I mean, of course, the exposure to all these wonderful philosophers and different ways of thinking in the spiritual world, probably really helped you. But I'm curious, how did your interaction with your father really shift you into a place where you were able to move forward on your path? And also maybe you could speak a little bit more about the next sort of 10 years of your journey and what that meant to you as well.
Yeah. Um, I didn't take it all very well, the tragedy, and it was weird because I felt very divided in a way that I do not today. And the work that I teach, I think, helps people to integrate themselves so that they don't feel divided. Um, but I did feel very divided. I felt like half of me was this enlightened being that was living in the cosmos, untouched by reality, life or death, birth, was untouched by pain, was untouched by loss, was untouched by reality, basically. And it was an outer body experience that felt very akin to that of connecting with star systems. And even when I remember trying, hallucinogens and varied, psychotropic drugs when I was in my teens and early 20s, I remember thinking to myself, this is very similar to the person that I am, this 50% of me, and the beliefs that I hold and the knowledge that is within me as a knowledge keeper. And so it never felt like I was like, ooh, like LSD or mushrooms. Like I never felt like they were revealing to me something that was in any way new. It was only verifying something that I was. But the other 50% of me was fragile and vulnerable and flawed and insecure and doubtful and filled with fear and resentment, filled with resentment about being poor, filled with resentment about being, shorter, whatever. I mean, I don't know why that would matter, but like, I think I wanted to be a tall blonde. I was a petite brunette. I filled with resentment about having to communicate with other humans. I didn't really love social interaction, even though I was very popular and I got along with people. It still caused me massive amounts of anxiety and self annihilation and self hatred and all the things that I think my clients today and my fans and the readership of my works, all can relate to. But back then, I felt very divided. Like there was this half of me that was very human, and this other half of me that was holy and untouched by the realities of life and death. And so the next 10 years were spent, kind of being in like this very artsy depression. And when I got signed to Sony, I was still in that very artsy depression, very fashionable artsy depression. And for anyone who's listening who's really into fashion or art or music or snorting coke off of toilets, like, this was the way that I found my peace on earth, because I was like, if you were an artist that was as despairing and broken and melancholic as I am, you would get this, you would know me too. I was like Harold and Maude, well, half of me, and then the other half was Maude. But I lived in the Harold part for at least another decade. And, that led to many tragedies, which, you heard about, Yasmin, at the talk that I gave. But during that time, I, lost my daughter to sudden infant death syndrome. I lost my best friend to suicide. My father died suddenly of a heart attack. My house burnt down. I lived in the house after it burnt down, just doing heroin every day. I did heroin every day. I did cocaine, when I needed to leave the house, and it was kind of speedball after speedball. And it wasn't until 2008, the end of 2008, when I had the, kind of awakening that I really needed to wake up and get sober. And that's kind of where I believe my life began. And it took a long time to integrate these two parts of me, the human and the cosmic. But I would say that what makes me me today is that I am both of these things, and very extremely so.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Biet. And I love that. And I think so many of us are sort of taught to like suppress our shadow side or not show it outwardly to people. We don't talk about it. And I think that this integration of self, I think, is such an incredibly important point in culture today that a lot of people are not speaking about and talking about. Like, we're all human, we all are deeply flawed, and we also, have these beautiful gifts to share with the world. And I love the fact that you're able to talk about your journey and own that. And I imagine, like, even today, that there's still, even with the integration, that there's still work to be done in that fragmentation of self. And so, I'm curious, for folks who are in your audience or people that work with you, who are going through their own kind of suffering, how do you help them and walk them through this journey? If you could give them any kind of advice.
Yeah, I mean, the first step for me was just seeing myself and all my ugliness, which is the way that I termed it in the beginning. I saw this beast, this heroin addicted, self absorbed, selfish, manipulative bitch. And this person who was just like sort of like a stray cat, just kind of trying to survive in the streets, which is where I'm from. And I saw her, and I was able to behold her, just behold the whole of her. And I think that's the first step that most people skip. If you think about your relatives or people that you know in your life who just aren't changing, the reason they're not changing is because they have a false idea of what they actually appear like on the outside. They think they're kind, they think they're nice, they think they're efficient with money, they think they're, really going for it with life. They think they're have great relationships, great friendships, and like meanwhile, the reality is chances are that their life is actually a tornado of failure. And for me, the humility of being able to see my failure was the great beginning. Today, this is many years later, it takes much more work than just seeing it. I have to move my body, I have to do intense, like, I've created a somatic practice that I take people through at my events and in my courses, which help you to just feel in your body, like, not just like, why am I a piece of shit, but like, what led to this? Like, what incident happened to me as a child that led me to calcify in this way? And then through that movement and through the memory realization, I am able to heal these parts and then have new, like you said, it's a never-ending, joyous discovery, but there's new blockages. Like, I'll come to and I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like, like, just little noticings, like, oh, I overeat when I'm in social situations. That's just like a random example. But it's like, but why? Why do you
Mm,
overeat in social situations? And I have found that the answer to that question lies inside my body and lies inside these dormant memories that are deep inside me. And by moving through them and using these breath work and somatic techniques, I am able to actually come out on the other side and have a different experience, which I think could add, since you asked, what is spirituality? I would say spirituality is having a completely different experience than the one you had previously.
mm. That's powerful. Wow. So, I'm curious. You talk about movement. You talk about breath. What does that do for the human system and the human body? We've got like a very diverse audience from over 70 plus countries, and for some people, they're learning about some of these modalities for the first time. I'd love for you to talk to us about maybe in particular breath. I think because we did a lot of breath work during your talk,
Yes.
and I know that's a big part of your practice. But why is breath so important to you, and how have you worked with it in order to do your own kind of inner healing?
Well, breath is, it is the single most important aspect of our lives. If you were to, like before I was saying, pay attention to yourself, you would notice that you don't breathe all the time. That makes no sense because you're thinking, well, I'll die if I didn't breathe. But you can hold your breath for extended periods of time. I find that whenever I'm looking at Instagram, I'm not breathing quite great. There's many instances that make my breathing short or substandard. So I would say the first step is recognizing again, as with all spiritual techniques, is just recognizing the failure, recognizing the ways in which I'm falling short. And then a reverence for breath. Like when we were born, we take our first breath. And ever from that moment, we take, however many breaths, but we think that they're just coming and coming. And I have found that when I'm really present and breathing, I remember that this could be my last breath. And
Hmm.
I think that that's lost on people quite often. And then they squander what little time we have in this incarnation. I can't prove that there's more, but it seems like there's probably more. But let's say this was the only one. It's like it doesn't go by slowly. It goes by quite quickly. And when you're like 80, you look back and you're like, whoa, that was fast. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I founded several breathwork systems, and one of which is really darling, and everyone loves it because it gets you high as fuck in like 4 minutes. And that one is beautiful because it's not breath work, it's actually anti breath work. So many people will write to me who are breath work experts and be like, well, this isn't breathing. You're not breathing. And it's like, of course it's not, and like punk rock isn't music, and Patti Smith isn't an artist, like what I mean? Because like real art and real spirituality is always going to be effacing. It's always going to um, what's that word? It's going to confront you.
Mm.
And so for me, it's like not just about breath work, which I do every day and all day. I focus on my breathing, but it's also about anti breath work. It's about focusing on the beauty and tranquility of life, but also like facing death, and I think my breath work actually is very confronting and can, people faint, people black out, people sometimes go into shakes and convulsions, like that can happen. And I think that's pretty confrontational. That doesn't that's not like some like, "Let's sit on a lotus leaf and find enlightenment."
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I imagine that the breath work actually kind of pushes people out of their own ego, right, and back into their body, which I think it feels like, anecdotally, my observation is a lot of people feel very disconnected from their bodies, sort of stuck in like the past or the future, but not really super present. So
Yes.
Biet, I'd love to also understand how music has shaped your own sense of spirituality. I mean, it seems like you had a really big music career. I also had the privilege of hearing you and was just so overcome by how beautiful your voice was during that talk. It was a kind of like different from the talk that you gave. There was a session where a couple folks were singing, and yeah, you just have such an incredible voice. So I'd love to understand, how has music shaped this work that you've done?
I am a musician, I am an artist at my absolute core. It is what I mean, I don't identify with anything, but for some reason I came to this planet and I've been singing since I came out of the womb. And it hurts. I write records. For anyone out there who makes music, it's not like, again, it isn't. It's a painful process. I kind of feel like the whole monarch process every time I write a record. It's very painful. I have to run out of rooms and take notes, um, and I think there's a lot to that. It's like this transmission, but I do believe that music and math, both of those things, are kind of the language of the cosmos. They're the language of the beyond. And so they open up the emotional center. So, what I've done is I've recorded records that I now blast when I do huge events with people, and I'll blast the music and be guiding my breath work and meditation techniques and somatic work. And then the music, what we will do is open up the hearts of the attendees and myself and allow us to feel something. And feeling something is actually, it's really hard. And again, I think a lot of spiritual traditions are trying to get people to be more like, I don't know, give up desire and just like be chill with whatever is. My spiritual practice and my technique is all about it's fourth way, right? So it's this idea of like pursuing greatness and pursuing like love and pursuing marriage and pursuing real estate and pursuing world travel and like exceptional living. I just find that to be so cringy in the sense that, it's like people almost, because everybody wants that, right? But I think for many of us, we deny that we do want as much of it that we do want because we feel bad. Like we're like, oh, I don't want to sound like everyone else saying I want billions or millions of dollars or saying I want a really hot bod and like to get fucked in some like tropical island. Like that's so cliche. So then I think what we do because we feel embarrassed about our desires is we pretend we don't have them. And then many people will bypass their deep desires and longings with spirituality. And it's like, that's not my fucking kind of spirituality, bitch. Like, I want a spirituality that gets me a huge loaded bank account, a cock in my vagina. I want all of it. And babies and money and like ocean, like I live on the fucking ocean, and I'm about to make a baby. Like, that's not spiritual. That's fucking crazy.
Oh my gosh, Biet, love your style. It's just amazing. Because yeah, I think it's interesting because the idea of spirituality for a lot of people it feels like very heavy and serious, and and just this idea that there's we sort of have to like release all of our desires and longings. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're creative beings, and we should live the full life of everything we want. As long as we're not hurting others. I think there's so much more that I think people could be living in their experience, but choose not to, or feel a sense of guilt and shame, and that's such an indoctrination in our formative years from
Mhm.
school and religion. So I love that piece of what you're guiding people towards their inner world. And it's interesting, Biet. I'm wondering if you've also had this observation that it seems like a lot of people don't really understand or know what they want, like what their true desires are, because we don't have the space to be able to tap into that. So I'm curious, for folks that you have met who may not know what they want, like what would you tell them to do in order to investigate their inner world?
I would say something super controversial, which is pray. I
Mm.
don't believe that anything that I have gained wisdom wise, any of it has come from anything other than prayer. Because meditation is very, there's an austerity to meditation. Like you can say at fancy gatherings, I meditate, and your ego gets a little walk like a poodle in the park, right? But no one ever looks good if they say they pray. It just sounds so wrong in a society where prayer has been completely, stripped of all its beauty by horrible people in religions of the world, right? Like every religion of the world has horrible people in it who have taken this gorgeous, delicious, communication that one can have with the divine, and then turned that religion, whatever their view of that religion is, into murder, rape, imprisoning, racism and God knows what else, genocide. And so I think for most people, when we hear the word prayer, we think of that. We think of, the Tutsis being slaughtered, or, we just think of,
Mm.
we don't think of what it really is. And prayer is just a conversation. It's just a conversation. Like, I don't see myself having any relationships other than the relationship that I have with the divine. And I call that thing God. And I'm not religious. I want to be very, very clear about that. But I do feel that if I didn't talk to that source energy and say to it on my knees, please show me what to do. Please shut me the fuck up. Please speak through me. Please show me what to do. Show me how I'm flawed. Show me how I can serve you better. Show me how I can sit down so that you can. And then at the end of the day, after doing that prayer led me to discover who I am, what I'm meant to do on this earth. And by no surprise on my end, as soon as I did listen and obey those commands that came from deep within me, I was a huge success. I went from poverty to wealth. I went from being single perpetually to having the love of my life. I went from losing a child to SIDS to having a healthy child and another healthy child on the way. I went from being confused about my career and money and, to being so completely inside my purpose. So I would say prayer is the number one source. And I don't recommend a religious form of that, but everyone finds their own prayer. As long as you're willing to just get weird, and just beg.
I love that, Biet. Thank you. That was the catalyst for my own spiritual journey on the island of Hawaii. Actually, someone told me in this retreat, you should try praying, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then I eventually did, and that was what sort of sparked my whole journey. So I love that so much. I'm curious, in terms of prayer, do you pray every day? Do you pray kind of whenever you feel inclined to? Just curious, because you're right. A lot of people talk about meditation, like start the day with meditation, and I've generally found that meditation is about listening, and prayer and setting intention is about asking. And those two things are very different. We can listen all we want, but we should also ask for what we want. So yeah, I'm curious. Do you pray as much as you sort of meditate? What's been your kind of morning routine or practice in that?
I mean, eventually it all becomes kind of one thing. So I pray and I meditate all through the day today. To me, meditation is pause. So what that means is, I do like a full half hour sit, not in the morning anymore because I have a toddler, soon to have an infant. For anyone who's listening to this who's a parent, and if you still do that, God bless you, must have like, I don't know, grandparents or nannies or whatever that come very early. But I just like immediately go into childcare, and then later on, my childcare comes, and then I go into my spiritual practices. But I'll do a half an hour sit in which I sit in complete stillness, and then I'll move and I'll do my somatic practices. I'll finish off with the Guided by Biet breath work. So I really use the practices that I teach, I use on a daily basis. And then all through the day, like I have found that if you leave prayer and meditation on the cushion on which it happened, you are a fucking idiot, because that's not the point. The point of meditation wasn't so that you could like get on a cushion. Like, who gives a fuck? That what matters is that I'm about to say something really inflammatory to my partner, and then I just pause and I'm like, what do you want me to say? And then this voice from within is like, just don't say anything, and I'll like not say anything, or like I'll get an email. Like today, someone totally did something so disrespectful to me. By my ego will tell you, it was so disrespectful. Like, this bitch, I cannot believe what she did. And like, my ego is from Queens. So yeah, and I was so like, God, go fuck yourself. That is what I was thinking as she was texting me. And then I took a deep breath and I was like, you're just not going to say anything, you're just going to do nothing here. And so I wrote to her something like, I'm happy to help in like every way, exclamation point, exclamation point. And then like I get to pause and I get to see what God has in store for that relationship. But I'm not going to be the one to bring harm to that relationship. Like it just is what it is. And so today in my life, like I don't go around creating that much wreckage. And that comes from that prayer. And so, yeah, like if, for anyone who's listening, you just pause, you take a deep breath, and you can say something like, please help me. Like that, just that's so simple. Please help me. Or you could take a pause, take a deep breath, and then you can say, thy will, not mine, be done. That's a little bit more Judeo Christian, but I like it because, again, it reminds me that it's like the will of thy universe versus my little Biet will.
Mm. That's really, really powerful. I think a lot of people are, they struggle with that moment of feeling triggered and just being in a responsive reaction mode. So for folks listening in, try that. Let us know how it goes. Um, Very fascinated. Wow. So Biet, I'd love to also talk about perhaps like some of the decisions that you made that has felt difficult but important since being on this path and working with so many different types of people. Like what, if you're looking back on your journey and working with specific folks one-on-one or in groups, like what are some decisions that you made that felt difficult but important?
How do you mean by decisions? Like what?
Yeah, like when it comes to like I guess because the spectrum of folks going through this journey or turning inward towards self, they really come from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And so, I'm curious, is this work, the work that you have put out in the world, is it geared towards folks who are more open to the path, or is it kind of geared towards anyone, who maybe doesn't even believe in anything spiritual? I'm just curious, like how you kind of work with different types of people and different types of audiences. Like, how do you kind of bend or mold your philosophy, or do you not? Do you just sort of allow people to sort of, if they're not ready, they're not ready?
Yeah, it's attraction, not promotion, right? So it's like I am, it's like saying I've always seen myself as like akin to the Beatles or akin to, the Rolling Stones. Those are two rock and roll bands for as an example. The reason I mention them is because it's like people don't come to see the Rolling Stones because the Rolling Stones have like a message for them necessarily, right? They come to see the Rolling Stones because the Rolling Stones are an embodiment of fucking rock and roll. Like they're hot, they're dressed perfectly, they move perfectly, the music is incredible, and the being level attracts. So being attracts being. So I don't ever focus on, I never change my message for anyone because I don't see the point. The point, I change my message for God, like if whatever that is for me. Like the universe says to me, like, you're gonna, like in the beginning, it said, like, you're gonna shave the front of your head. And I remember meeting this guy, like we were like in New York City, and he was like some dude in the wellness space, and we were having lunch, and he looked at me and he was like, "Why do you wear your hair like this?" And I think he was like confused, like on many levels confused. He was just like, "I just like, is you seem like kind of like a hot girl, but like you have this weird haircut." But like just even like I wasn't. There's just like the whole thing was like I didn't do it for a purpose, but like as soon as I shaved my head in that way, I was featured in several magazines with beautiful like full page images of my head. And I think there's a reason because there was something about that hairstyle, which I don't wear anymore. I just have short bangs, but like there was something about that hairstyle that recalled a memory in me to something that I cannot explain. I don't know whether it was Egypt or what it was, but it was unexplainable, but it did to others. And so like I just follow that, and then I feel like that my beingness infects others. And I do think that the reason people get so much out of my events or out of working with me has very little to do with spiritual principles that I'm teaching, because there's really only like five spiritual principles, and like me and like Eckhart Tolle and every fucking other spiritual teacher all have them. No one's like, coming out with it's the being. You just when you're around someone who gets it and is that comfortable with themselves and like both themselves and the cosmos. Because I used to be just comfortable with the cosmos. I was like, I'm with the cosmos. It's like I had to get comfortable with the raw dying, like I'm about to have a C-section, like the getting blood work next week. Like, yuck,
Yeah.
that part, like I'm going to die one day. That when you can get with all of that, people feel it and they just want to be around it.
Mm. Amen, Biet. I love that so much. And how do you deal with, folks, that push back on that level of, confidence and expression of self, for folks that might, I don't know, disagree or have like their own opinion? Like, how do you just persevere? Like, what do you do?
I just don't like, to me, like you said, like I was raised with such adversity, and I'm so graced. Like I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up being like punched in the face by like gangsters. I played CeeLo on the sidewalk with like literal criminals. I've been arrested. I've done like sorts of prostitution. Like I am like so not
Ah.
some fucking perfect, like, and so I just don't judge others. And so like when I do get judged, like I remember once I got written up on Page Six, and it was like Page Six loves like those really like grab your attention headlines. So it was like, this spiritual teacher believes you can find enlightenment and nirvana through shopping and sex. And so of course, like instance later, Jezebel grabbed that and wrote a whole article about me. And they were like, well, it must be nice to be so privileged and white that you could like, find enlightenment through shopping, whatever, white bitch. Like that's what Jezebel had to say about me. And I was like, I'm a minority who grew up in the ghetto. Like, couldn't you have just Googled me for a second before
Hmm.
you went to town on my white privilege?
Right.
Right? Like, can you? I mean, not to say that even like I'm sure someone with white privilege is just as capable of finding enlightenment as someone from the ghetto. But it's just, the point is like they love to jump on
Hmm.
anything, or some. One time I posted a photo of me like kind of half naked, and someone was like, "Oh, must be so hard to find enlightenment when you're skinny and white." I don't even really consider myself white, which is it's just so funny. Like I'm just like reading it, and I was just like, "Yeah, it's been real easy. Let me tell you, it's been a breeze."
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. So refreshing talking to you, Biet. So I would love to know, like, we've gone through this massive pandemic. I'm sure that your point of view has evolved over time. I'm curious, like, what has changed in your work and in your practice since the pandemic? What have you observed? What have you noticed about people, humanity, what people are going through when it comes to their own inner world? Yeah, what have you observed?
I mean, I think we all got a big, smack in the face with the pandemic, kind of a wake up call. And for me, I had to refine like the way that I approached addictions. Like I used to go to, like my workouts all had to be within class environments where there was like groups, because I
Mm.
needed that motivation of people like yelling and screaming and cheering around me to like keep going. And so the pandemic like forced me to like really finish my workout. Like I finish workouts no problem now on my own without any encouragement from the outside world. Um, so that happened for me. I think that was the main transformation. I had a really great time with the pandemic, which I know is like super controversial also, and it's like blah blah controversy, but like I was so blessed to be able to continue working and at the same time, like really refining my practice. And I was a new mom. So it was like a perfect time for me to nest and hang out with my tiny little baby.
Hmm. Beautiful. Amazing. Amazing. What sort of things have surprised you the most on your journey, looking back?
I think the fact that I would like it here, that surprises me the most still till this day. I just, Earth is such a fucked up place. Like, I don't read the news. My husband really does. And so, like, I hear about the news through him. But I just can't deal with it. Like I literally open the newspaper and it's like bad news, bad news. Here's this form of bad news and this form of bad. There's a shooting of transgender, and then there's like this war, and like then also climate change, and like the presidency and Elon Musk, and it's like none of it's positive. It's all super negative. But it's also like super negative that I have a client who just called me and like was diagnosed with some like major illness. Like it's just not a free ride. Like Earth is like a fucked up it's so crazy here, and it's like, you think about operas. I don't know if you're a fan of opera, but I love opera. And it's like, what is opera based on? It's like murdering your sister, raping your, you know what I mean? It's
Mm.
like death, 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 murder, rape, incest, death, and heartache, right?
Mm.
And so for me, like the first half of my life, or not the full first half, but I think into my 30s, like I really just wanted off this planet. I remember I used to think it was such a huge compliment when someone would say, Biet, it's so clear to me that this is your last incarnation here, right? Like you've heard that, right? And I would just be like, that's right, because I'm the Buddha reincarnate. And like whatever story I had about how great it would be to fucking incarnate off this planet. And when I actually found enlightenment, which I have, for all the listeners here, you can all know that you are being guided by Biet. No, seriously, like I found it, right? And once I found it, I was like, wait a minute, enlightenment is actually realizing that this is what we wanted, that this is what we chose. And oh my God, fuck death and blood and pain. Like the moment I gave birth to my last daughter, Cash, I just remember holding her in my arms and was like, oh my God, I just murdered you. Because I gave birth to her. So like I am like inherently responsible for her death. If it wasn't for me, she would never die.
Mm.
And so but who thinks like that, right? Like, I mean, the morbid ones like myself, right? Artists, whoever, I don't know, who fucked up Jewish people like me, but like, I just felt the tragedy. And like, everyone talks about it. Like, as soon as you watch your kid grow up, you're like, you already know they're going to stop snuggling you. They're going to start slamming doors in your face when they're 14. And by 18 or 20, they're going to like move on and like get married and have their own life. And it's so painful. Like, this person is like someone you carried in your belly or like breastfed, and like then you snuggle with them and they're like this cute little, it's not a kitten, like it's a person. And it
Oh
hurts,
my
it
gosh.
really hurts. And if you're married, which I am, that person too, they're going to drop dead. One of you is going to do it and first, and then you're going to hold each other. It's all going to be very tragic. Like it doesn't end well. So I think like for me, the surprising part was that I actually found that I wanted this. I want this. And I don't want to incarnate off this planet. That's not a compliment to me. I'm like, I'm coming back, bitch. Like, let's do it again. Like, fuck yes. And take my memory and bring me back completely new and confused and in pain and heroin addicted, you name it. But I'm going to fucking find my way back. And that's what's beautiful about this planet is you get to find your way back. Doesn't matter how far down the scale you go. You can wake your ass up and you can go, oh my God. Oh my God, I was wrong. That's what's surprising is that you're fucking wrong. If I had one message for the people, it would be like, you're wrong.
Oh my gosh, Biet, I definitely missed our last conversation. This is great. So I'd love to know also, like, who do you look up to and who would you say was your biggest mentor in your life that really transformed the way that you saw the world?
It isn't one person for me. It has been a collection of souls. And I found that we are like, again, the level of being, it's a frequency thing. So my father was the first. And since then there's a woman named Sherry who has helped me greatly. Um, there's a man named Peter who has helped me greatly. My husband helps me greatly. And, the list just kind of goes on and on. But like, I do believe that the God, divinity, whatever you call it, is in others. Like I heard someone talking about God the other day, but they were talking about Jesus, which is fine. That's cool. That's cool. But like, I was just like, but yeah, what's the difference between Jesus and this cat? Or what's the difference between Jesus and you, Yasmin? Like when you and me hung out in the car last time we hung out, you were driving me back from wherever we were to like the proper or something. And it was just like, so magic. Like you're filled with God, what I call God. You're so inspiring and you've got all these great ideas and like great techniques you're trying. And like, I just look for that in everyone that I meet and I find it.
Mm, mm. Wow, amazing, amazing. What do you think your dad would say to you right now, looking over you?
He would probably be like, let's drink a shot of vodka, which I do. Dad, sorry you made an alcoholic, but I'm not.
Oh my gosh. And I have to ask, how is the 30-day no complaining challenge?
I failed. I failed. I failed so
Okay.
miserably. I went into like a spiral of complaint about 3 days later, and it was some of the hardest. I don't remember what happened, but something was very, very difficult. And I was going to text you and be like, "This is just beyond a situation that I can contain this kind of promise inside of."
Oh my goodness. So for those listening, we did a 30-day no complaining challenge, and I actually posted it on social media, and it was so fun because so many people were so excited about it and were like so, just hunky dory, like we're going to definitely do this. We're very excited because there's a lot of science and studies that if you don't complain for, I think it's actually several months, not just 1 month, then it actually literally transforms your whole neural networks, and it just changes your whole reality. And so I had so many text messages from people who were like, well, it's been 24 hours and I have completely failed this challenge. Like it was so funny to receive these text messages, just because I think we're also just like so programmed, to sort of be aware of our environment, look for what's wrong. But I did this only because when I lived in New York 10 years ago, I was listening to Deepak Chopra before I even understood what Deepak Chopra was saying. And there's this one like sutra that he had, which was like, I will judge nothing that occurs. I will judge nothing that occurs. And I swear to you, Biet, for like 6 months, even my friends know this about me. I didn't gossip. I didn't say anything negative about anyone, even like some of the worst things happened, but I just said nothing. And it was like one of the most transformative years of my life. And
You said that. Yeah,
yeah.
it was so inspiring because once I tried it, I saw you as like a demigod. I was like, well, Yasmin, I may be the great spiritual teacher, the great messenger of wisdom from beyond, which I am, but I ain't no, I complain, man. Like I use it as a form of connection. I can't also like, I feel like I alienate my husband because we complain a lot together. And so like, he would complain, and then if I didn't join him in complaint, he would go on this whole like, "Oh, what are you just like better than me now?" And I was like, "Fuck it, I'll just complain so that we can just like get along."
It's so, well, that's so funny, Biet. Oh my gosh. So what do you want to tell our listeners about their health, wellness, well-being? What is your main takeaway? If you could tell our audience anything about how they should be moving forward to live their best life from everything that you have experienced, that you've taught others, what's your main call to action?
Well, the first one is the prayer piece. Just ask on your knees or ask however you ask. Please help me. Use those words. Show me how I can be of service. Put people in my path that I may help. That would be my prayer. And then look outside you for signs. When I had nothing, I had no money, I had no resources, I had no networks, I had no connections, I had nothing. I remember finding books in the street for $1 from homeless men in New York City. And the same thing, because I have people write me all the time. It's like, oh, must be nice to like have the kind of resources to come to your events or whatever. And I'm just like, well, you can buy my book. It's like on Amazon, or you can go to the library. I have many people write me whose lives I've completely transformed, apparently, who got my book at the library, and they tell me about it. And I'm just like, I made no money on that. And, like, that is one of the thoughts I have. And then another thought I have is like, isn't that amazing? Because for all the people who think that you can't access it or that you need X to do Y, the other thing is just remember that like things that seem really cheesy are true. Like the law of attraction, all that secret stuff. It's so cheesy, but it's true. Prayer is so cheesy, but it's true. It's like the things you really don't want to be true are the things that are true. And when it comes down to it, you will be taken care of by those things if you actually lend yourself to them.
Love that so much. And Biet, I'm actually like reflecting on our conversation in the car. One question that just has come up, and I need to formulate this in a way that makes sense because I don't quite remember it, but you'd mentioned something about life being sort of this movement towards a type of momentum in which like you're then going up and then coming back down, going up and coming back down. Do you remember what we were talking about? I'd love for you to share. If you do remember, we can share it. And if not, we can move forward. But
Was it my theory of enlightenment? Like the wheel and how like
yes,
always
yes, yes.
round?
That was it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just after a time of looking for enlightenment, which I'm assuming many of the listeners today are, like I found that I was being beaten down by my quest for enlightenment because the paradigm that I had about enlightenment was that it was done once it was found. So the way and that is how it was explained to me. Like the Buddha found enlightenment, then he sat under a tree forever and like never had a feeling again, or like Jesus found enlightenment and then he like walked around just being like super pious and like never had a feeling or lust or anything ever again, and the story goes on in every archetypal tale that this is what we're looking for. And so every time I found enlightenment, which kind of feels like that, oh, like white light running through the forest, like, oh my God, I remember the meaning of it all. I remember why I'm flawed. I remember why I was poor. I remember why I lost my kid. I remember why I'm short and brunette and got like a booty, like whatever it is about me, right? And you guys, whoever's listening, you have your own versions of being short with a booty, like I promise. And so, like, like once you can actually get that that is going to be followed by subsequent flaws, like I wouldn't have been able to be on a podcast years ago. Even I was already a famous spiritual teacher, but I felt this obligation to stay on the mountaintop and so that you guys could all respect me. I don't want your respect. I want your love today. And to me, it's like, so I created this new definition of enlightenment and it goes like, it's a wheel, right? And the top of the wheel is enlightenment. That's 12 o'clock. And the 12 o'clock is like where you feel that white light. You remember who you are. You remember why your flaws are perfect. And then that changes. Like it doesn't last forever. And I think that's the part that hurt me. Like I was like, wait, why can't I stay in enlightenment forever? It's like, that would be weird. You'd be like shaking at parties. You need to like calm down. So number 3 is 3 o'clock on the wheel. And 3 o'clock is like where you do creative flow. Right? You start a podcast, or you write a book, or you create a record, or you start a business. Like that's all 3 o'clock. But then there's 6 o'clock, which is like really hardcore, not what I thought enlightenment was about. And that's achievement and accolades. So it's like spreadsheets and cold calls and networking events and like whatever, marketing techniques you might learn. And these are all things that I found were abhorrent to my former spiritual self that wanted everything to be so crisp and like, I just wanted the story to be like, and then I was sitting on a lotus leaf and someone came along and was like, let me, Simon and Schuster was like, let me publish your book. And then they did. And from there I was, on Oprah, like that. The story is like, it just doesn't fucking work like that. Like, yes, they find you, but then like, yeah, and then it's just like a lot of life, you're still flawed, you still eat pizza sometimes, you still have thoughts that you wish you didn't have, you still get angry, like that happens. So then you hit 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock is humility. And that's where you like really feel like you're a worthless piece of crap. Nothing's going your way. You can't stop complaining even though you tried, that kind of stuff. And, or like today when that woman disrespected me or whatever, it's like 9 o'clock. And then you fall to your knees and you realize you of yourself are nothing. And you say, please help me. God, I just can't do this. I can't do this. I hate this place. Please help me. And then you are taken to a height beyond your wildest dreams and retrieved back to enlightenment. But you must fall to your knees. You must find humility to do so. And then what we were talking about in the car is that goes on over and over. And once I stopped seeing enlightenment as a static moment of running through the forest with my tits in my hands, remembering myself, or like that moment when like everyone looks at me and thinks, Biet, she has found herself. Like that is not it. And that it's dirty and gross and there's spreadsheets and like puking while I'm writing my new record, and then there's falling to my knees because I hate myself and I hate my life and things aren't going my way. Well, like that's all part of it. And it all returns to enlightenment. It just, once you get the hang of it, you can just return over and over, and you can enjoy all the other parts. You're not like waiting for them to pass so that you can stop being in pain, because you're not resisting them anymore.
Mm. Wow. Amen. And then you also kind of intuitively know where you're at in this wheel, like kind of which part of the clock you're at in a certain project or moment.
I think so, but like as it becomes more organic and as you become more proficient at this wheel, I find that oftentimes they're all happening at the same time for me.
Hmm.
So what before used to be very like different. Like I felt like there used to be a big sojourn, like journey. Like I was like on a camel ride from like one town to another in terms of like the distance between my pain and agony to my bliss. Today, I feel like I can experience both pain and agony and bliss at the same time because I no longer define them as contradictory to one another. So
Mm.
as I'm experiencing humility, I feel high and enlightened. Or as I'm working in the weeds of my spreadsheets, because I'm not judging myself and being like, God, you're a fucking loser. Like there's this, I'm enlightened in these spreadsheets. It's like everything has become very unified.
Mm. Wow, amazing, Biet, amazing. And are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you and your work and how they can find the Guided by Biet series? And if they want to bring you into their company, where can people find you?
There is my website, which is guidedbybiet.com. It can also be reached by just bietsimkin.com. And then I have a Instagram, which is at Guided by Biet. Those are the two best ways to find out about what I'm up to. You can also sign up to my mailer if you go to my website. There'll be like a little pop-up for that.
Amazing, amazing. Biet, thank you so much for your time. I feel like every conversation we have, I fall more and more in love with you and who you are and who you're being on this planet. So I'm super grateful for this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. You can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality.